very excited to welcome the next speaker, Molly Sands. Molly currently leads the Teamwork Lab at Atlassian, where she and her team study how AI and distributed work are transforming teamwork. But what I really love so much about the work that she does is that she's not just studying the future of work, she's also building it through large-scale experimentation, which she then translates to product strategy, shares externally with customers and the media, and ultimately shapes how the entire industry thinks about teamwork and AI. It's really, really inspiring, and I've been loving keeping up with her work. So I'm really excited to chat with Molly, not just about her incredible success, but also just about the path that she took to get there. What I have learned from my chats with Molly is that this journey wasn't handed to her, right? It came from her strong vision and her willingness to keep moving forward, and to watch for opportunities while not waiting for permission. So come on up, Molly.
Hi.
Okay. Hi. Sorry, I just want to have my timer to make sure that we're.
Oh yeah, please.
To make sure we're on time. Okay.
Shall we sit?
Yeah, let's sit. Where do you want to sit? There?
Around the middle.
Yeah, perfect. Is this good? Yeah.
Film crew, let us know if we should move.
All right. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Me too. Excited to chat with you. I would love to start at the very beginning. So tell me a little bit more about the original mission of your team and what was the problem that you guys formed to solve.
Yeah, so I am the head of the Teamwork Lab at Atlassian, and we make products for people to work together online. And when the pandemic happened, our founders were really strong in the idea that we think work happens online. We can tell from the tools that we build. You know this well from Slack. And we knew that we were going to be distributed and that we were going to have people working remotely in our company forever. And we thought that was relevant to everyone. And at that time, most of the conversation around remote work and distributed work was very much based on people's opinions and their experiences. And you all have heard lots of stories of leaders saying, well, you know, I learned a lot from the guy I sat next to in the office. And so how will we operate in this world? And we knew that that was a way too simple idea of what needed to happen. We also knew that a lot of the ways of working that people had brought home with them from the office were not working well for companies. And we needed data to add to that conversation. And we needed some genuine experimentation about how people should work. And so our original mission was to figure out how to let people work anywhere, anytime in a global organization, and how to do that through our products, but also through the habits and behaviors that people engaged in the company.
That's amazing. I mean, that sounds very familiar to some of the work that I used to do at Slack, but I think you guys spent a lot more time on the experimentation component. So can you share a little bit more about what that looked like?
Yeah, and I think this is really where it fits into this idea of moonshots and is very relevant to all of us today. But how do you study something that doesn't really exist yet, right? We're all used to doing research on things that are real in the world. But when we come to these moments of profound change, especially with technology, we thought the right way to figure this out was actually to change some things and see what happened. And so my team's original mission was taking teams at Atlassian and completely transforming how they worked top to bottom, teaching them how to do things in new ways, changing the ways they connected and communicated, and then measuring the impact of those changes. And we started with that as the core, but very quickly expanded from there, right? Because just knowing that something works in some of the teams in our company isn't really sufficient, but we could capture these, I like to call them pockets of magic. So these places where teams are doing something differently or they're willing to, and we can start to capture that and export it to a lot more groups, study how they work. And then, you know, we actually needed to know that for the whole world because we're building products for 300,000 companies. And so we started doing these huge scale industry studies, and we started doing a lot more qualitative work, and we started doing a lot of work with our customers, and we started having transformation programs. And you know, now we work with F1, changing how Atlassian Williams works, and all these very, very cool things. But it started from that kind of seed of we can't really learn about the future unless we change something and we see what it could be like if it was different.
That's the part that I find so inspiring is a lot of people, when we're doing research, we're observing behaviors, we're seeing what is happening, but you sort of translated that into actually building the future, right? Like, let's actually try it out internally. Let's do these experiments to figure out how this is actually going to work. Can you just talk a little bit about how you sort of navigated through that journey? Because was somebody asking you to do this specifically, or was this something that you thought, oh, something's missing, let's stop observing, let's start building? Tell me a little bit about how that all came to be.
Yeah, I mean, you alluded to I don't like to ask for permission. No one ever asked me to do this, right? No one was like, hey, this is how we think you should set this up. We think these are the right ways to tackle these questions. That moment won't come. I often say to my team, no one's coming to save you. And then they much more nicely reinterpreted that to why not us, which I think is maybe a more positive frame on it. But no one's going to ask. And so really what I think about all the time is where are we trying to go and what is preventing us from getting there. And so when I started doing all of this work to understand distributed work and remote work, the problem was everyone just has a lot of opinions, and we don't actually have a good solution to offer them. And so in that moment, it became clear that adding a lot more data about why employees wanted to work in certain places and adding more, about how they were spending their time could be useful, but it wasn't actually going to offer them a real solution. And so it became pretty clear that we needed to do something that would give us a more comprehensive answer to that question. And that's usually how I approach my work. I love research methods, and also I don't care about them at all. I like to use them all. I like to use them very flexibly. And my team has all sorts of different skill sets in order to be able to do that. But my research team isn't even all researchers. We've got a bunch of amazing researchers.
Can you talk about that? Because you also have a really interesting career journey. But talk about not all of your research team being researchers.
Yeah, so I'd say it's about half. And lots of them they're experts in social psychology and IO and all these fields where they've really studied people at work and studied the products people use at work for a long time. But I also have amazing content experts. I have people who have done deep transformation work for a long time. I have learning designers and content designers on my team. And at this point in time, as people are they're talking about how the boundaries between functions are collapsing, and that's a conversation we should be having. It's been fun and interesting to say, oh, I've led a team like that for a long time. I used to keep that a little bit under, keep it a little under the radar, because functionally that can be a little funny. But what we really need is to go end to end, right? We need to understand what are the best teams doing. How do we build experiences that get other teams to do that and have the technology actually do the heavy lifting for us? And then, our work flows a lot into the media and the press and into our marketing strategy of how do we help people understand that we are actually building for the future. And those are the people you need and the skill sets you need in order to do that full end-to-end journey.
But what I love is that, and I think we all as researchers, we have a very important superpower, right? We're very close to our customers, to user needs, to what people, the biggest problems that need to be solved, right? And so it's our responsibility to push that forward, and we can't wait for someone to, sometimes we just can't wait for someone to ask, right? We have that conviction, we have the vision, we have this responsibility to just plow forward.
And I think a lot of the time people don't know what to ask you for in that way, right? So when I think about this, I think about the business leaders I work with and the people building amazing pieces of our platform, and I try to think ahead of where are they going to get stuck? And I ask them, what is it that you're just not sure about right now? And they'll tell you. They know what they're not sure of. And so when you start to frame the conversation around that, it becomes a lot easier to pull some of those threads of, if we knew how this worked, that would be really helpful.
Yeah,
and I think that helps you get out farther ahead so that as they come up on decision points, you're already ready to go with answers.
Yeah, that's a great tip. Okay, so something that you and I have talked about, and I spent a lot of time, actually, Brian there in the front row, we worked together on sort of Slack's version of the Future of Work think tank. And I would get a lot of questions like, gosh, Christina, how did you get so lucky to have that job? That seems really cool. You get to talk to the press and like go to conferences and be in the media. So can you like help me, or let's dispel some of let's dispel a little bit of that. Tell me a little bit more about how that actually happens.
I love this so much because I can't tell you how often people are like, oh my God, you're so lucky, this job is cool. You only research interesting things. And I do think the research we do is genuinely very interesting, but it was definitely not a fell into it luck kind of situation. And I think it ties into this idea of no one is coming and asking you specifically to do the study that's going to define the future of work. Same for you. I know it's a lot of sweat and tears behind the scenes, but it's also thinking ahead and knowing the right people and focusing on the right problems. I've been very fortunate and also actively sought out leaders that are more forward-thinking. And I think this is an area where most researchers have a lot more control than they think. You get to work with people across your whole business, or you most likely get to work with a variety of people in different parts of your business. And so find some of them that really are open to the possibility that something could be very different. And I think that's where a lot of the most interesting work happens, where you're asking these truly hard questions and approaching them in a very iterative way. But yeah, it wasn't really that lucky, which is good news for everyone.
Well, so tell me a little bit about like this idea of seeking out leaders, or like, because I think you've been fortunate to work with leaders who are really receptive to the work that you do and really encouraging of the work that you do. Like, did that just happen, or like, tell me a little bit about the role that you played in that?
Yeah, I've repeatedly said, I would love a job you could Google, like that I could search for on LinkedIn. And then every time that I need to get a new job, I find like the only job that doesn't exist on LinkedIn. So I do think it's partly seeking out people and situations and companies that have taken kind of an interesting stance. And I feel like we're hearing from a lot of people today about that are in companies that are doing something really different. And oftentimes, if the work environment you're in is a little bit more innovative, I think that helps tremendously. Slack's a great example too, right? Like, you all built a platform that fundamentally changed how people communicate at work. And that kind of company and environment is going to draw leaders and people that are a little more forward-thinking. And so I think that's...
And I think you can also play an active role even during the interview process. Like, they're interviewing you, but you're also interviewing them. Like, are these people that you want to work for? Are these people that are going to be inspiring and receptive to the type of work that you want to do? And then also, I think you talked about, like, when you're at a company, there's your direct boss, but there's also all of the other leaders around the company that you can seek out as collaborators and as sponsors, or whatever you want to call it, for the work that you want to do.
Yeah, and I've just never come across a situation where you are on target for the big questions the business is worried about, where you can't get advocates for doing that work. And I think it is about finding time to think a little bit more broadly about your portfolio and what's in it, and what would be the next thing that would change the conversation. And I have gotten to work with some really amazing people that are doing some different things. When I came to Atlassian, Annie Dean, who is the head of our Team Anywhere program, hired me. And the first thing she said to me was that in the next 2 years, I'd like for you to put yourself out of a job. And I was like, oh, okay, well, this is day one at this job, so I wasn't like fully prepared for that, but great. And I think that sort of energy of, we're not going to do this forever. We're going to do something else because you're going to figure out enough of this that there's a new challenge is absolutely the right energy to bring to every job that you have. And if you do that, the job will continue to exist and there'll be many more after it.
Yeah, I love that. Can you share maybe some tactical advice of, like, if you are seeking out, other people beyond your direct manager to work with or to be receptive to the work that you're doing, like, what do those conversations look like? Like, how do you have that conversation?
Yeah, okay, so the first thing is you have to be very curious. And I have spent a lot of my career, I haven't always been a researcher. I did my PhD in psychology, and that's where I started, but then have worked in product and in marketing and a few other spots too over the course of the last many years. And getting to understand what those people are solving for is really the thing that's been the best for me. So spending time with people in other jobs, other functions, whether that's inside your company or even just, you can do your users, the people you talk to, really getting a sense of how are they going to approach, what are the things that they're thinking about, how are they going to try to use that information. That has been the most useful thing I've ever done, because it's really different to think about the rigor of the work and how do I get great high quality insights in front of you. And that's super important. But then when you're trying to make a decision, being the consumer of that research is way different, right? And the amount of questions you have around it is different. And the amount you care about the details of any individual study is actually very little, which I think all of the speakers in the Moonshot research have really talked about. And so the more that you can kind of think about what does this person actually need to do and be ready for that, that helps.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I think we've heard it from earlier speakers this morning too. We as researchers can be researchers with our stakeholders, right? And let's be curious about what they're trying to accomplish and how we can be most helpful and how we can support them in their goals and KPIs.
I mean, that's literally our jobs, right? Yeah. And so applying that at work to help yourself makes a ton of sense.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to take a pivot. We're talking about Moonshot research. I don't think you can talk about Moonshot research without talking about AI. Yeah. So I think that maybe not the researchers that we just heard from, but I do think that there is a healthy amount of fear about AI. So for people who feel a little bit fearful of what AI is going to do to researchers, what would you say to that?
Yeah. So I think this is actually a really exciting opportunity where everyone has to redefine what their job is. And actually in some of the panel earlier today, they talked a little bit about this idea, but all of the boundaries between roles are collapsing a little bit. There's also places where your taste and your expertise is getting so much more important. We are amazing at thinking about problems. Everyone in this room knows how to do that. They're good at defining problems. That's an amazing skill set to have. But I think we have to show up and say, hey, in the future, this is how we are going to contribute. We are going to help companies understand the problems they're trying to solve. We're going to help them figure out which problems are actually worth solving. And we can get you pretty far in the right direction, so you're not just aimlessly guessing at what people need. And that's not going away. I think that making dashboards and a variety of the different activities that we do are going to drastically change. I think that's exciting because a lot of that work, we don't have to do it, right? We can then think about these big moonshot problems, and that's what's most energizing to me about research. And so I do think embracing AI, learning really how to use it and how to do your job with AI in the mix is super important. My whole team is now, to the point about putting myself out of a job. I kind of did. We figured out a lot about distributed. You all work from lots of places on your laptops. We know a lot about how to do that really well. And now my entire team is focused on what does work look like with AI? What does it mean to have teams of humans and agents? How do they communicate? How do we bring that to life in our technology? What do you need to know? And how do we actually design all of these AI products for the way that people work? Because that's the tipping point that we're at right now with this technology, where it's actually getting harder to work because you need so much cognitive capacity to track a million things and to learn to do everything totally differently. And I think we're going to see a huge swing towards how do we now design for people being really key in this mix.
Yeah, so there's a couple things I want to dig in on, like what you just said, which is like all of this new technology, we're working with agents, we have like just who we're working with is just more complicated now, right? Like there's so many research questions there. Like we have to all figure out how to actually do this together, and who's best to figure that out than researchers, right? But then also you said something before about like our superpower is figuring out what's most important, or figuring out what the opportunity is, or what the biggest user problems are, right? Like building, designing, that's all getting so much easier with AI. But what's not going away is like making sure that we're building the right things and that we're focused on the right problems. And that's what everyone in this room does so well. So how do we like really lean into that? Because that's never going to go away. And like that's so exciting that that's us.
Yeah, and I think that's the work that drew us all to this in the first place. Almost every researcher I know was very interested in people problems, right? And how do we solve them? And so getting the opportunity to direct more of our attention there, I overall see as a good thing.
Well, we're almost out of time, which of course we didn't get to all the questions. I would love to just maybe close with like, sometimes I think we talked about this, especially when we were sort of chatting beforehand. I think sometimes, and I will be the first person to raise my hand, sometimes I get in my own way. I think sometimes researchers can get in their own way. I'm curious, like, what would be sort of one piece of advice that you could give people, especially as we think about where we are with AI, with everything that's happening? What would be one piece of advice that you would leave this group with?
Yeah, I think that I often see researchers get less focused on the problems and building actual solutions to them, and a little more focused in the wrong context on how they're going to do that. So overly focused on methods, talking maybe too much about rigor. A lot of that stuff should happen within your research team and is super important, and we all know how to do good, high-quality work. But when you think about what other people are going to consume, it matters so much that you have more comprehensive answers and that it feels like you're offering solutions or paths or alternatives and really helpful information to move that forward. I tell all of my team before they start working on my team that they need to read the book Smart Brevity, and we joke about it a lot because I'm like, should be on their marketing team at this point because I'm sending this book to everyone that gets a new job. But you're trained for a long time in research and academia to like add more, add more, add more. And really just being able to clearly say, this is what we learned, here's how you can apply it, here's how you shouldn't apply it, and here's maybe something else that we need to know, or how this fits in the broader context is like all you need to do. And so that's my best advice.
I love that. Make a TikTok.
I know. I loved it. I loved every second of it.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Molly. Don't go anywhere because we have time for a couple questions. So who has questions for Molly? Don't be shy.
All right.
I think we have one in the front here.
Big smart brevity fan too, Molly. But how do you get researchers over the hump of all the backup, all the detail? Was the question that got asked earlier, right? Which is, there's so much insight. How do you get people mentally through the hoop of, I have to distill this down to such a short, impactful statement?
Okay, so AI can actually help you immensely here in being able to distill things. I also love and expand, right? Like, you can write that detail down. The detail doesn't have to go nowhere, but it can't be the headline, and it doesn't need to be everywhere. And so I think it's really just about like spending the time to get it to be good and to get it to be concise and clear. But don't feel like you can't communicate that to anyone. Just pick your audience.
That's great advice. Looks like we have one over there.
Hi, Jordan. You mentioned briefly many roles are kind of collapsing in job definition into themselves with AI doing as much as it does. Where, from your perspective, would you, if anywhere, be protective of some of the space that we do have? Is there any space to guard from anyone else doing research through AI, or what kind of guardrails might you put in place for these these cross-functional stakeholders who are looking to use AI to do more research?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I think that I think it's more about actually creating the guardrails so that people can do good, high-quality work where they can. And I see AI as useful for that. One of the biggest problems I've always had is everyone feels like they can have a conversation. That is not research. Like, conversations are great, have them. Also, think about what you should learn from those conversations, and I think it's really important that researchers help other people understand when you should take something and trust it and when you shouldn't, and that not everyone is going to be good at that. Not everyone is going to be great at taking data and then turning it into the right types of insights. So helping them understand that more in an enabling way than like a protective kind of way, I think is good. But those are kind of the main places that I would focus. And then letting people have access to the information feels like something that's getting easier. Because I can't be there to like answer every question. My whole team can't be there in all the rooms to answer all the questions. So if there are ways to use AI to make it easier for people to say, okay, what do we already know? I think that's really, really high impact and will help expand the impact of the amazing work that you all do.
I love thinking about AI as a way to scale you. That's a nice way to think about it.